Good morning, folks. I hope you all are having a great day. One of the sub-projects I was working on with the bike over the winter has to do with crankcase ventilation. Now, the V-twin motor, the way it works is that the pistons are more or less in sync. So on the Harley, they go like this, basically. And every time the pistons go down, both of them are going down fairly close together. And they create a pressure inside the crankcase. And this pressure would potentially blow the seals out of the motor if they weren't vented, if the crankcase wasn't vented. When the pistons come up, right, it creates a vacuum in the crankcase. Both of them come up more or less together. And creates a vacuum inside the crankcase, which is robbing the motor of horsepower. So in the TwinCam, I don't know about the other versions of the V-twin for Harley. In the TwinCam, they take these pressure vacuum pulses out of the head, and they route that pulse into the back of the carburetor. And the EPA says you've got to recirculate, the crankcase ventilation. So back in the 70s, cars had to put this little gadget on the motors to take the oil mist, those pressure pulses, out of the motor and burn them instead of dropping them on the ground, which was what was happening. And Harley decided to, at some point in time, to take the same approach. Take the pressure pulses, right, from the crankcase, route them up to the carburetor, and burn them, which was fine when oil burned. But today's modern synthetic oils don't burn. They remain more or less the same, very high temperatures. So when I was redoing the exhaust system on this bike, taking the old exhaust system off, I found that the soot inside of the muffler was very oily. There's a lot of oil in it. It wasn't dry at all. So what happens with this design, which is flawed in my opinion, is that the carburetor is actually sucking oil mist out of the heads, the cylinder heads, all the time. It's not a matter of the pulses, it's a matter of the carburetor is feeding the intake valves, creates a vacuum behind the air filter, and that vacuum sucks oil mist out of the heads. So Harley's mechanism here is that they have a little nipple for a tube that they supply with the air cleaners, and that little tube goes into the back of the plate, the air cleaner plate, inside of the air cleaner. It's not outside the air cleaner, it's inside, so that the vacuum that is created inside that carburetor behind the air filter is sucking the oil mist out of the heads and accommodates the pressure and vacuum pulses that come through those tubes. In my mind, that's unacceptable. So what I did was, first I removed those two little rubber tubes and put small short bolts in the holes they went into in this backing plate for the air filter, and sealed it up by tightening those bolts down. So now there's no way air can get in behind the air filter. The carburetor, all its air comes through the air filter. But then the question was, what do I do, right, to vent the heads and not drop oil on the bike somewhere? I mean, you could run tubes from the heads back to the tail of the bike and have it flowing out the back of the bike. It still comes back, gets on your disc brake, gets on your drive belt, gets everywhere. So you can't do that. So what I decided to do, actually my brainstorm at 2 o'clock in the morning was, well, why not route the tubes out of the heads into another air filter, into some kind of catch. Now if you look at this bike, there's something strange about it. It has an air filter on the left side of the bike. So people seeing the bike, right, might do a double take thinking, well, that's a really old motorcycle because it's got the carburetor on the left side of the bike, but it's not true. But it looks natural. I mean, it looks like a natural part of the bike's design. I took tubes and I ran them from the nipples that come out of the head down to this air cleaner. So now when the motor is on its downward, on the pistons are pushing down into the crankcase, building up pressure. That pressure is relieved through these tubes and go into the back of the air cleaner. Now you need an air cleaner because there's also a vacuum part of the stroke. So when the pistons are coming up out of the crankcase, they create a vacuum and suck air into those tubes. And you don't want dirt getting into the bike that way, into the motor. So 2 o'clock in the morning, I had this brainstorm of mounting another air cleaner on the bike over here. And to do so, I had to take the horn off, which is what normally hangs right here, and move the choke, which normally sits right here, over to the top of the carburetor. There's a little kit on eBay that's $15 to relocate that choke. I would do it anyway. It's a much better place for the choke. Much easier to go to. So what I did to hang this thing is I created a bracket out of 1/8 inch aluminum, and that bracket bolts up to the back of this air cleaner just like it was the carburetor. So the air cleaner bolts to the face of a carburetor, now it bolts to the face of this bracket, this plate, and then I drilled 2 holes in the back of the plate that go into where the carburetor would pull air through the hole in the back of the air cleaner. And I bought 1/4 inch aluminum tube, cut 2 little pieces out of it, and a 1/4 inch hole in the back of the plate, and put the tube in the back of the plate, and then brazed it to seal it. So now I've got 2 little pipes sticking out the back of this plate here, and I just connected the tubing that comes out of the cylinder heads right into this air cleaner. Now, the carburetor was pulling air mist or oil mist all the time. Every time it opened a valve, intake valve, it was pulling oil mist out of the cylinder heads. And that oil mist wasn't burning, so that's how the exhaust system got loaded up. Naturally, the motor is a net zero in terms of moving air in and out of these tubes. So the pulses in the motor, when the pistons go down, push air up to the cylinder heads through the push rod channels, push air out through these tubes into the back of this air cleaner. Now the air cleaner I've filled with air cleaner foam to catch any oil residue that comes with that air, any oil mist. When the pistons are coming up, the motor is sucking air through the air cleaner back into these tubes. And that's why you need an air cleaner here. It's because that you don't want to introduce dirt into the motor by air being sucked back into the motor through these tubes that come out of the cylinder head. So the net result of this pushing and pulling should be actually very little oil ends up in this air cleaner, and the air cleaner is very easy to clean. You just unbolt the cover and squeeze out any excess oil or wash it with mineral spirits or whatever and put it back together. I don't anticipate having to do that more than an annual checkup kind of a thing. And it looks good. It looks natural to have, on Harleys, it's natural to have a piece of chrome there. And in terms of the style I'm trying to move this bike into, it's also natural for bikes in the 30s, actually earlier than that, to have their carburetors coming out the left side. So as you're walking down the street and you see a bike, a Harley, with its air cleaner on the left side, you might do a double take and say, how did the carburetor get over there? But it looks appropriate, it looks nice. So that's been my solution to the crankcase ventilation problem. It's actually very easy to do, and it doesn't cost much. This is an old air cleaner that I had lying around off of my 1971 Sportster, and it's just the perfect size. It's small, it works nice, and you could use any air cleaner. That's the most expensive part of this resolution, and I just had one lying around. So if you're going to try to do this, I would just look on eBay for 1970s, Sportster air cleaner, and you'll find several about that size that are relatively small. I haven't tried it out other than just running the bike in here because the project isn't done, and it seems to work fine. And that's fixed that problem while I'm waiting for my tank to arrive, which is being custom made. So the bike is all cleaned up, all the wiring is done, all the wiring's moved to the top of the backbone, and it's now ready for the tank. The exhaust system I've replaced, and I'm not going to show that until the bike is pretty much done for this summer, and it looks great too. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this gives you some ideas on dealing with this crankcase ventilation problem with a straightforward solution that also looks great. Thanks for watching.